In this episode of the Locked On NBA Big Board podcast, I have a question for my co-host Leif Thulin. Did NBA teams overthink it on draft day? Zach Edey, Dalton Knecht, and Ryan Dunn, were they undervalued? Stay tuned. Big shout out to each and every person that has made the Locked On NBA Big Board podcast your first listen of the day. I'm your host, Rafael Barlowe, the director of scouting for NBA Big Board, and my co-host for today is my guy, Leif Thulin, the man that watches more college basketball than anyone else. I think there's 17 days until the start of college basketball. We've been having a little bit of teasers and a little bit of exhibition games that are just kind of getting us prepared for this crazy season. But before we get into this episode, I want to let you know that this episode is brought to you by FanDuel. You can start the season with a big return on FanDuel. Place your first $5 bet and you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets. Guaranteed. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. And if you're not subscribed to the YouTube channel, I'm not sure what's taking so long, but please subscribe, like, share, comment, click the bell so you can be notified every time we drop an episode. We're coming at you 5 days a week or more. This is a weekend episode. And I want to say we've gained about 150 new subscribers this week. 17 days, right?
You wouldn't believe the amount of college basketball reading I've done the last few days. I downloaded a guidebook, about 420 pages of just rosters to pour through, which I already know most of the rosters. I know how I'd construct my team, but I like to read this stuff, see if any other people lead me on the right trail. And you add that to Jazz and Utah Hockey Club. And I'm a little behind right now, catching up on some of the scrimmages. So looking forward to talking to you about those and sharing our thoughts on some of the high-profile prospects that have now played. Dylan Ace looked good, but I've also been watching the Summer League and pretty impressed with some of the guys we're going to talk about next.
Yeah, so my question is based off, and I know it's preseason, so let me just make that loud and clear. I know it's preseason. It is an extremely early sample size, but do you think there are a few prospects that some NBA teams just thought too much, overthought it, and maybe, I mean, they'll never say it publicly, but are kind of wondering man, did we make the right pick?
I think so. And in fact, I'll put myself in that. I overthought a few guys. And the first one I'll talk about is Goliath, and that's Zach Edey. You look at what Zach Edey's doing, and I saw him at the NBA Combine, and I had this moment where I saw him run faster than Sar, and I could tell he was running faster. I was like, wow, he looks like he's a better athlete than I could get a grasp of watching TV. Then I saw him in person after the NBA Combine in Utah and for Summer League. I was like, man, he looks even thinner. Wow, he's going head-to-head with the guy who I think's improved the most on the Utah Jazz this year in Walker Kessler. And I think he's winning the head-to-head. And that wasn't even a disparaging sentiment about Kessler. I thought he played well in that game. And then you watch him play in this Summer League next to Ja Morant. You watch him, and I know it's the small sample size and varying levels of effort from different teams and different lineups, but he buries people in the post. He sets bone-crushing screens for the most athletic guard in the world. I almost said the country for college basketball, but Ja Morant's the best athlete of guards in the NBA. He sets bone-crushing screens, gets them open. He sets screens for Desmond Bane to come off pin downs. He allows for Jaren Jackson Jr. to do exactly what he does well and not have the deficiency in rebounding. So honestly, while his numbers are good, who cares about the numbers? What he does is he's going to make an impact right away on a team with aspirations to actually win. And if you can draft that wherever you draft that in a class that's perceived as poor, then it's a really, really good day and a really good year of drafting. So I was wrong about Zach Edey. I'm already willing to throw that away. I had him about 20 on my board, and I was wrong. Zach Edey is deserving of being top 10 already, and I'm pretty sure he will be a top 10 rookie. And I'd be very confident in him more than just about anyone, especially because of the landing spot. You can't choose your landing spot, but he chose, or where he was chosen really benefited him, and he's going to benefit the Grizzlies.
Bronny James disagrees. You can choose your landing spot.
I guess that's true.
I'm joking. I guess Alex Sarr did too, because he did not want to go to the Atlanta Hawks. But back to Zach Edey. I think there's no middle ground here when it comes to Edey. Either you are going to say, I told you so, I knew he was going to be good, or you're going to be like, how you just explained, and even myself, okay, I was wrong. I even had somebody comment on one of the videos. Me and James talked about it. It's like, you guys are horrible scouts if you didn't see Zach Edey or something like that. I had my concerns. I still have some concerns, but they are not as loud as they were 6 months ago. I was at the game against the Mavericks, and the first thing I noticed is he had slimmed down. And then I mentioned it in another episode. It may have been the one I did with you last week. He just wears guys down, whether it's from the screens, because after a while you get hit by a Zach Edey screen, especially if it's Ja Morant coming at you full speed. After a while, you're going to say, you know what, I'm going to go under. I'm going to avoid the screen. But even on the offensive glass, he just wears guys down because guys are fighting, trying to keep him off the glass, because you have to box him out. He can get the offensive rebounds, and then he's just going to wear guys down. So I wanted to see, in the game that I saw, I wanted to see who wears down first, him or Daniel Gaffer. Again, it was the first preseason game, so of course there were probably some nerves there, and the first, real live NBA action in months. They both got worn down. But as I've watched a few Grizzlies preseason games, I can tell that he's wearing guys down. And then the game against the Pacers, it was old school basketball. James and I did an episode on it where they just gave him the ball, cleared out, let him go to work. He had multiple possessions where he got 3 dribbles, 2 dribbles. And with a guy like Zach Edey, if you're going to give him that many dribbles and there's no sink or help, he's going to get a bucket probably 70% of the time. So my question is, and I'm a Blazers fan, and I've even seen a few people post a question online. Did Portland overthink it by selecting Donovan Clingan over Zach Edey?
I don't know if I necessarily think it's overthinking, because Clingan, no matter what he does offensively, I don't think it's going to look as good as what Edey can do from the jump. It depends on how good each of them are defensively. But what I will say is, we did an episode previewing the national championship game, and I predicted that Zach Edey would get his, but Donovan Clingan would look like the better prospect coming out of that matchup, because even though he's had 37 or something like that poured on his head, he stymied Edey without help in critical junctures, should there be any. UConn wins by 20. He's given no help. He blocks him 2 or 3 times, and it looks like he wins the matchup. It's like Florida playing Greg Oden. Joakim Noah and Al Horford are top picks as well. And Greg Oden was a better prospect than Zach Edey. The reason I bring that up is Zach Edey can have a larger impact in terms of his team, because his team's got winning aspirations, whereas Clingan's development and how it comes along, if it's immediate that's pretty good, then you'll probably be at even footing to start. But Clingan could grow more slowly and not be as under the microscope, and it could be a good pick in the long run. I think Edey's going to have a better year than Clingan. So in the immediate process, probably you may have overthought, because he was on a better team and Clingan was getting, some people said, number 1 pick. Some people said top 5 prospect. I was a little lower on Clingan. I thought that he was benefited greatly by UConn's perimeter and his other teammates, but I was also low on Edey. And I think Edey, like I said, is going to impact winning right away on a team that has aspirations of winning. And it will depend how Portland uses him and how gradual or rapid the growth ascent is for Donovan Clingan to answer this question more appropriately down the road.
All right, let's just throw it out. 5 years from now, who is the better player?
I'm going to go with Zach Edey.
So you're basically saying Portland overthought it by taking Edey, or by taking Clingan over Edey.
I think it would be really interesting to see if Donovan Clingan and Zach Edey swapped roles, though, because I think Donovan Clingan could be great in Memphis. For so long, everyone was saying, "Oh, if Clingan gets to 9, oh, watch out!" Mm-hmm. Like, they're going to take Clingan. What if he did get to 9? Would they have taken Clingan? So I don't know. I don't know if Portland thought that they'd be taking Clingan either. I think Memphis knew they were taking a center, and I'd imagine they may have taken Clingan even if both were available. And so that would have been a really interesting thing to see if that would have occurred. I think Clingan would be very good with Morant, because he's an even better defender than Edey is, and he can set screens and catch lobs, and he's a better lob threat. But Edey allows for a little bit of a offensive presence himself, and he's going to impact winning right away. So you're going to learn. I mean, you know this, and as does James, as does Richard. And when I talk, it's usually about how they can impact winning, how they can all like accelerate and change the course of a franchise's trajectory. What he's doing is immediately impacting and accelerating their chances of winning, and that's what matters most to me. So give me Zach Edey.
So it's almost like they flip-flop, right? So in college, Klingan had the better team, didn't have to do as much for his team to win. Edey had to do everything for Purdue to have a chance. All right, when we return, we'll dive a little bit more into Zach Edey and what did we overthink? What did we miss? And then also we're going to talk about Dalton Knecht, who I still can't believe he fell outside of the lottery. And then Ryan Dunn, I don't care who you are. You did not expect Ryan Dunn to shoot like this. You may say you did. You may say you've seen the flashes, but there's no way you saw Ryan Dunn shooting the way he has shot the ball in the preseason. All right, before we get into the second segment, let's talk about Hims. Hims is, they're basically changing healthcare, men's healthcare, by providing you with access to affordable sexual health treatment, and you can get it from the comfort of your couch. Hims provides access to a range of doctor-trusted ED treatments like chewable hard mints. You got Viagra and Cialis generics, and you can get it for up to 95% cheaper. The process is 100% online, so there's no need for that uncomfortable doctor visit. All you have to do is just answer a few questions on their site, and a medical provider will determine the right treatment option. If you are prescribed, the medication will ship directly to you. It will be in discreet packaging, and it's for free. There's no insurance needed. One low price covers everything from treatments to ongoing care. With hundreds of thousands of trusted subscribers, Hims can help you find the ED option that works for you. So start your free online visit today at hims.com/lockedon. That is HIMS.com/lockedon for your personalized ED treatment options. Again, hims.com/lockedon. All right, second segment. I'm going to dive a little deeper into Zach Edey. So for me, what I missed about Edey early on, I just thought that the pace of the game was too fast for him. And I know that's something that you mentioned too. And then by the time, and I can say I was late to the party. By the time the NCAA tournament started, I was just like, all right, he's faced every defense. He's too big. He's too strong. And there is a way for him to have a role in the NBA. I thought a team was going to select him in the first round, but I also felt like, you know what, it's going to be a team that is already good, that needs to throw in like a wild card to be able to like switch it up from time to time, gives them a different option as far as playing styles. Now, I can't say I saw him going top 10 all the way up until probably like the last week of the draft. And then I started to hear there were a couple of teams that were interested. What did you miss on Zach Edey?
Well, the pace was my biggest concern. My belief was if a team were to take him lottery, they'd make him a building block of a franchise, and I didn't think that was wise the way that the league was trending. Now, I had him about 20, 22, somewhere around there, and my belief was similar to yours, that he would play 10 to 18 minutes on a team that was winning but not necessarily great, and he was going to be a big body and give him an alternating pace change-up type of guy compared to a faster, more modern center. And I thought it could work. It just depended who he was next to. What I think I missed from the collegiate game about Edey is no matter what he does, he's going to shoot that jump hook at a high enough percentage. And if you play to take away his left shoulder, meaning taking a right-handed jump hook, he can spin and bury you in the basket. He's going to get you extra possessions. And I thought it was because Purdue had this style and it was excellently coached by Matt Painter that they were going to be able to control the pace well enough and control the boards and control that they have few enough turnovers, that they have enough possessions, and they should win just about every game unless you can take away all of their guards because Zach Edey's a willing passer. Like I believed very strongly in his intangibles, but I believe that the coaching and the pace of college basketball benefited Zach Edey enough that it would be very difficult for him to have the same influence in a game where you could scheme him out with closer to his size competition with better speed around him, both on his team and against him. And, size you can't teach. And I think I started to doubt in how rare that is at the coordination and fluidity. And I think him losing weight and becoming more agile has certainly helped his stock.
Yeah, I definitely want to see how well him and Ja Morant mesh, because you have the guy in the NBA that probably wants to play at the fastest pace, and Edey was at his best when it was kind of a slower pace. Even though he's been able to get some baskets in transition here in the preseason, there was a play against the Pacers. It was like semi-transition. It looked like a set play to me in a sense, to where Edey trucked down the lane. Nobody really sprinted the floor. They kind of like waited on him. It allowed him to like get deep position. And I think they had like shooters on the floor. So nobody was like really like sagging to deny him, because they didn't want to leave the shooters in transition. And he was able to just walk his man down, seal, and got a clean look. Is there a team from the 2024 draft that selected ahead of Memphis that may have overthought it?
I don't know. I think a lot of them, the positions they selected made sense. I mean, for instance, you look at San Antonio held 4 and 8. I know Minnesota ended up taking 8 and being in the trade, but you probably wouldn't have drafted Wembanyama with Edey. So like, I'm going to rule them out, even though I think that would be fascinating. I don't think you would take him number 1. I don't think the Rockets would do it because their best player, Alperen Şengün, is a center. So by process of elimination, that leaves only 1 or 2 teams that you could make an argument for. But I don't think you would go with him in Charlotte necessarily thinking about how you want to develop Mark Williams, because I think sometimes drafting over a young player is just taboo. Maybe it would have worked. Maybe he is better. He probably is. But it just is something that doesn't happen very often. So it seems a little strange to me, and it would have been critiqued heavily.
Yep. I think at the way the draft is going, with so many teams being in the lottery repeatedly and already having a young guy that was drafted the year before, 2 years before, I do think there is going to be a lot of overlap. And I mean, you look at Portland, for example, they still took Klingan at number 7 when they just traded for DeAndre Ayton, who was the number 1 pick in 2018. Yep. So I do think that either way you look at it is going to be some overlapping. I think it would have been fascinating to see San Antonio, what they would have done with him and Victor, as far as just giving you multiple options and styles to play. But I think for Edey, if I were like Edey's agent or his family, I would have been I'm pleased with where I ended up in Memphis, because he's going to have a chance to make an impact on a team that some people believe can make a deep playoff run. All right, speaking of teams that want to make a deep playoff run, you have the Los Angeles Lakers, who I think just absolutely got blessed that Dalton Knecht fell into their laps. I couldn't believe it. Like, I was like, there's no way that this guy is falling. And I was just watching the draft, and unfortunately for Knecht, he's like the Lakers' second most popular rookie right now. But I think that's going to change. I should say that. I think it's going to change, especially if he continues to play the way he played against the Suns. I can't expect 35, but I do think that we're going to have multiple games from Knecht this year where you see just the lights out shooting and microwave scoring. Why did teams overthink it? Age?
I mean, I was shocked too. I was right there with you. I liked these guys, and Dalton Knecht is someone that adds value the Lakers sorely lacked. So it makes way too much sense. What did they lack last year? They couldn't shoot when LeBron would create opportunities. So their half-court offense wasn't as good. LeBron isn't quite as able to dominate as he once was. Anthony Davis was a little bit streaky. So what did they need to improve upon? And I still don't think it's going to be enough by any means, but he's certainly the best suited to help them of probably the entire draft is shoot the basketball on the perimeter and be able to attack closeouts on the good shots that they create. And insert Dalton Knecht, and you certainly won't be seeing 35, but that microwave scoring that everyone loves from Austin Reeves, that everyone loves at times when D'Angelo Russell's hot, that's what you're getting in a 1% shooter, as he was called by his head coach, who is also in that 1% shooter club, JJ Redick.
All right, so here's a question for you. And me and James talked about this in a previous episode. Do you think Knecht is a shooter or a scorer? I think there's a difference between the two. I'm starting to lean more towards he's a scorer than just a shooter, because he does have his moments where he's cold, but he also brings more to the table than just outside shooting.
Oh, I've always been team scorer for Knecht. I think you could probably find some podcasts where I talk about how Knecht, and I think I compared him to Baylor Shireman. I said Shireman and Knecht, if you play him in the same role, they'll look similar because Baylor Shireman can knock down the same shots, he'll rebound. But he's a guy who can play basketball at the college level. But one of these guys, if you put the ball in his hands, is more adept at scoring, and that's Dalton Knecht. And we saw them actually match up in the tournament, and this proved the point. And I actually think, and you know how high I was on Baylor Shireman. That's not to knock him, and it's not necessarily to compare them as players, but they're comparable because everyone wants to compare two older players that have similar skill sets, similar size, and the same ethnicity. And you look at that, and what the difference is Dalton Knecht goes into the game and he doesn't have to shoot a single three. Obviously, he's a very, very good shooter, but that contributes to his scoring. But he doesn't have to shoot a single one. He's got quick, explosive leaping ability. He's able to stop on a dime, score, and elevate from mid-range. And he's just got more wiggle than I think he's given credit for. And it's not necessarily, wow, like that guy crossed him up, but he doesn't need space to elevate and shoot. And that's something a scorer has opposed to just a shooter, someone who designs shots. And that's the difference between he and Duncan Robinson, though you'll see him often play the position on a basketball floor that Duncan Robinson and JJ Redick played as just sharpshooters. You're going to see him come off pin downs and knock down threes, and they'll be like, oh, he's the Duncan Robinson role. That's great, but he's more than that.
Yeah, he can definitely attack a closeout, and he does have a launching pad that he can get to. And if he gets to that launching pad with momentum, you might see some highlight reel dunks. All right, when we return, we're going to talk a little bit more about Knecht. I want to get Leif's opinion on his role for the Lakers. I thought at one point, I knew he's going to play, but I thought he would have had to beat out Max Christie, who was just signed, and Cam Reddish, who, keeps getting opportunities. But I think based off the preseason, it's no comparison that Knecht is definitely deserving of playing time. But before we finish on Knecht and talk about Ryan Dunn, I want to talk to you about FanDuel, which is America's #1 sports book. And NBA and NFL fans, you can start this season with a big return on FanDuel. When you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats. You can view live play-by-play and so much more. And it is on the same page where you placed your bets. You'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. And all you have to do is place your first $5 bet at FanDuel.com. All right, going back to Dalton Knecht, what do you think his role will be with the Lakers as far as like in their rotation? Top 6, top 7?
I would say top 7 confidently. I could see him develop into top 6. But I think the defensive ability of the team, obviously Anthony Davis can solve a lot of issues, but their reliance on a few players to score the rock that they have in the backcourt makes it harder for him to be immediately inserted as the 6th man. I think there's a world where they rely more on defense and he gets pushed down a little further, because you look at some of their backcourt defenders and I'm not all that impressed. I'm not saying he fits into that, but you want to be more able defensively when you bring in the first guy and the bench starts playing. So I would say 7th initially.
I think eventually he's going to close games for the Lakers. I could see him in their closing lineup. I mean, I guess JJ would have to decide, do we want to go offense? Do we want to go defense? I like what Vanderbilt brings to the table on defense if he's healthy, but who's ever guarding him is just going to be standing there, just kind of playing free safety. Yep. And Bron's going to kick it out to him and get frustrated, and then it's going to turn into tough shots for Bron. Now, on the defensive end, Vanderbilt is who you need for Luka Doncic and Anthony Edwards and, maybe a healthy Jamal Murray, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, and so on. But then the Lakers are going to need offense too, in my opinion. And so Knecht will definitely bring offense, but I can also see him as the guy that the players I mentioned, from Luka to Shai to Anthony Edwards, clearly hunting him on every single possession. So I think it's going to be interesting to see what the Lakers do, but I can see Knecht closing games because he just brings so much offensive firepower.
Yeah, I have the exact same mindset. I actually think you're going to see Knecht close a lot of games because LeBron so often makes the right read at the end of the game. if you can have someone who can spray in a 3-ball when in a close game, I think that value mathematically is probably greater than his deficiency defensively because of what Anthony Davis can save and eradicate towards the rim. Like Rudy Gobert had the Jazz as a top 5 defense for 5 straight years with no plus perimeter defenders. I'm not saying that's necessarily the recipe to win a championship, but frankly, I don't think the Lakers can win a championship. And I think their offense needs to pick it up more so than their defense. I think their defense has been better in the half court than their offense at times, and they score well in the transition phase of the game because their defense sets it up. So I think Dalton Knecht's impact is slightly more positive in offense than what he does on defense is negative.
And he is a good transition finisher.
Oh, yeah.
All right, here's the one I've been waiting to ask you about. Ryan Dunn. You're one of the few people that I know that actually watches Virginia basketball. So I know you've seen him a lot. And, like I said, you watch more college basketball than anyone I know, but you watch a lot of Virginia basketball. Watching Virginia basketball is tough for me. I guess it's going to change now that Tony Bennett is gone.
I'm sad about Tony Bennett.
All right, I have a theory, and I'll probably get killed for saying this. Me and my brother, we're half serious, but we were joking, and we were just like, how does Tony Bennett go out and recruit when coaches are going to recruit against him by saying, you see how he held Ryan Dunn back? Based off the way Ryan Dunn has played in the preseason.
I would counter this with Ryan Dunn described himself as a spot-up shooter that was not good on defense and was very unprepared to play defense his freshman year. And now the reason he was a first-round pick, despite anemic shooting numbers, was Tony Bennett's pack line defense. So that would be my counter pitch. But that brings me into a little victory lap here. And you can verify this. We did an episode in May before last college basketball season that said, who are their best returning sophomores? I was like, man, I don't know if he's going to score much, but this kid from Virginia defends like crazy. I'm going to go with Ryan Dunn. Anyway, I wasn't as high as I should be because in the preseason, he had 6 threes in a game. That's more threes than most of us thought he'd hit the entire season, right? I think Ryan Dunn, and this is what I wrote down in my notes about Ryan Dunn. I found it. And so I have it here. Ryan Dunn is such a good defender if he's not a negative or even not a big negative, he's a steal if he's drafted beyond number 20. That's what I have written on my notes on Ryan Dunn. So he was drafted 28th, I believe. And I stand by that. But hitting 6 threes in the preseason game, and I know he wasn't playing with the top guys. I know the defense of the Nuggets didn't matter.
It doesn't
but
matter.
it didn't matter. But you play with Kevin Durant, you play with Tyus Jones, who's a distributor. You play next to guys like Bradley Beal, like Devin Booker, and your job is just to be a defender. And if you slash and get a transition dunk, if you create an extra possession for Booker and Durant to score, wonderful. And then you pay it off with 1 3 a game, that's a top 20 pick in this year's draft. I stand by that. And I had him for so long. I'm kicking myself as I say this. I had him for so long. And this is not hindsight. Richard could verify this in my top 20. And then when we get to the combine, I watched him shoot and I was like, man, the shot doesn't look terrible. I just can't say, seeing it in person, that he's going to find any confidence because he started off like 8 of 16 in the star drill, but he ended up 8 of 25. He lost his legs, lost his confidence. I was like, shooting's confidence. Herb Jones was a 7% 3-point shooter at Alabama his junior year. Could he emulate Herb Jones? Absolutely. Is Herb Jones a good shooter? No, he's not a good shooter in the NBA, but he's drastically improved. If Ryan Dunn can follow that career path and just become a 30% 3-point shooter who is an unbelievable defender, constantly threatening for all NBA defense, he'll end up being a lottery pick in redrafts. So, yes, he was overthought. This is the biggest overthinking of the entire NBA draft. And I know he hasn't played an NBA game. Like, he could shoot terribly this year, and I likely isn't that great of a shooter. But if he's even 30% and what he can add to a team in the Suns that sorely lack defense, it's a huge steal. So I'm kicking myself after taking a victory lap. But I do think if you watch Virginia play, you knew there was more to the table of what Ryan Dunn could do because you knew he could run in transition, which Virginia doesn't get into. And then offensively, they play so slowly, it's hard to get some of those motion threes, and they drive and kick. They don't do that very often. So he's what's called a blocker and a mover blocker. So he catches it and is asked to create, not his forte. NBA suits him better.
So I'm going to say that I don't think teams overthought it Because what was there to overthink? We're talking about a guy that shot 23% from three. I think he was like at 50% from the foul line. There were some signs of touch his freshman year. I felt like, and it was in my notes that going into his sophomore year, that I think there's a chance that he can develop into a shooter. And then I was just totally off of him as a shooter as a sophomore. I think he got worse as a sophomore.
He did.
He didn't even look confident. Then I watched him in summer league. I think he was 1 for 13 from three in summer league, which was, it was pretty accurate. The scouting reports, great athlete, great defender. I will say this. I thought the Suns did a phenomenal job in the draft because they improved their needs as far as adding a defender and athleticism and Dunn. But I didn't think that they got a defender, an athlete, and a shooter. And the way he is letting it fly, I don't think anybody saw that. So on one hand, I think when we go back down the line, we can say teams overthought it. There's no way that he should have fell that low in the draft. But it's hard to imagine him making the progress that he's made. If I were a betting man and I would have said, all right, which guy that has major shooting concerns was going to, and again, I know it's like extremely, extremely early, but which guy that has major shooting concerns was going to improve the fastest? Ryan Dunn, Matas Bazelis, or Ron Holland? I think Dunn would have been last of the three.
But their roles are see, you're right, but the roles are different. So those guys, Holland and Buzelis, are asked to create. Part of the issue with them is that their creation will be inhibited by their lack of ability to shoot the ball. Ryan Dunn simply has to hit spot up shots. So I would have told you I'm not confident he'll become a very good shooter, and I still am not confident he'll be very good, but he can be competent. But the way he's letting it fly, I could not have envisioned. But I would tell you, if you asked me which one of them in the role that they have could become competent, I would have expressed optimism. I wouldn't have been super confident, but I have had conversations with some friends that are very into the draft, and even Richard at the NBA Combine, that his shot doesn't look bad. Like it was never horribly broken, and he didn't have touch. It doesn't necessarily spin beautifully. It doesn't necessarily come off with the utmost confidence and wrist flick that you're like, oh yeah, I made that, like NBA players typically exhibit. But the form was not broken. And so I think I would have been more hesitant to believe in what Buzelis or Holland do because they need to have the ball in their hands.
Well, I think for Ron, he's going to have to knock down open shots. I think the role that Ron plays for Detroit is going to be similar to what Ryan Dunn plays. Ron is going to have to knock down shots because he's going to be wide open. You always talk about a dare shooter. Teams are going to leave him, as me and my brother say, butt naked in the corner. He's going to be wide open. I think in the preseason, he was like just 1 for 12 on jumpers overall. And when you watch his highlights, you see that nobody's guarding him. Dunn was making step back threes at the end of the shot clock. Like, again, I don't think anybody saw this coming. And especially, like I said, in Summer League, it wasn't like he showed flashes in Summer League. It was 1 for 13. The Phoenix Suns are the early, I mean, I know the season hasn't started yet, but in my opinion, the Phoenix Suns are the early winners of the 2024 NBA draft because they addressed multiple needs in one player, especially if Dunn can continue to shoot the way that he shot the ball. But I think yesterday or the game against the Lakers, he may have been like 1 for 4, kind of came back to life. I think there was another game before that between the 6 3-pointer game where he made like 1 3. But even the fact that he is shooting threes with confidence is a win because he was just a 50% foul shooter in college.
I'm with you. I would say I was as high as anyone in the world on Ryan Dunn about a year and a half ago. And then I was still higher than most, but not in my wildest dreams did I foresee the step back threes that I saw him shoot against the Nuggets. That was wild.
Yeah, that was crazy. There was one person I know that was high on Ryan Dunn coming into last season and even heading into this draft cycle, Chris Kesey from Kesey Scouting. He was a big Ryan Dunn fan. He also liked Reese Beekman also. Well, that wraps up this episode of the Locked On NBA Big Board podcast. Let us know, did these teams overthink it by letting Zach Edey fall to number 9? I don't even know if it's even a question to ask if teams overthought it by letting Dalton Knecht fall to the Lakers. But Ryan Dunn, and be honest, did you see this coming? If you are a big Ryan Dunn fan, did you see this coming? Let us know in the YouTube comments. Once again, it's Rafael Barlowe with Leif Thulin. But before we go, I want to let you know about the Locked On season preview. Check it out. From the East to the West, from the contenders to the pretenders, there is a 6-episode series with everything you need to know about this upcoming NBA season. You can find Locked On NBA on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcast. Once again, it's Rafael and Leif Thulin, and we are out of here.